So, good day to all of you. First and foremost, let me introduce myself. My name is Roperlyn De Castro Ronquillo from BS Ed Filipino Major. After they discuss the learners who are gifted and talented, now let's move on to the learners with difficulty seeing. So, first, let me discuss the definition of it. Students in the classroom will exhibit different levels of clarity, eyesight, or visual acuity. In one classroom, I surely know that we encounter the different levels of clarity, eyesight, or visual acuity. Some student constant eye rubbing or chronic eye redness. There may be some student with harm or restricted vision. Learners with difficulty seeing are those with issue regarding to sight that interfere with their academic. It will affect on their academic. So students with difficulty in seeing feel self-conscious about their condition. So let's move on to the next definition from IDEA, or what we call the Individuals with Disability Education Act. This states that an impairment in vision that even with correction and adversely affects a child educational performance, which include both partial sight and blindness. These students may need to have their eyesight corrected by wearing glasses or optical devices. So the idea, or the Individual with Disability Education Act, is help to ensure that all children with disability are provided equality of educational opportunity, full education, and independent living and economic self-sufficiency. They need some student that difficulty in seeing need to wear glasses or use magnifier or use extra lighting for their classwork. So now I discuss the definition of it. And the next one is how to we identify the students or the learners that have difficulty in seeing. So let's identify it. Learners with difficulty seeing often have physical sight signs such as crossed eyes, squinting, and eyes that turns outwards. They may also be clumsy, usually bumping into objects which causes them to fall down. They like to sit near the instructional materials or at the times would stand up and go near the visual aid. So when we identify the learners with have physical sign, and we encounter some of learners or students that have difficulty in seeing. So the teacher need to do is to have seating accommodation to help them to see you or the whiteboard. They need someone to assist in taking notes and extra time to go classes or compile their assigned work. So identify the next one. Learners with difficulty seeing may also show poor eye-hand coordination. This can be seen in their writing, or poor performance in sporting activities. Another indication is poor academic performance, as this student may have difficulty reading as well as in writing. So it's not easy to have difficulty in seeing, because when it comes to their performance, it encounter a lot of challenges. The inability to see an objects at a distance to read, a whiteboard, or trouble in reading. Usually, this kind of students sit in front to easily understand the instructional materials of their teacher. So, after I discuss definition and identification of difficulty in seeing resume will continue. Thank you for listening. Again, I am Roperlyn Ronquillo, BSED Filipino.
Isang maligayang araw po muli sa ating lahat. I am here for the continuation of our report. I'll discuss the letter C, learning characteristics, and letter D, the general educational adaptations for learners with difficulty seeing. Before we start the discussion, here are the objectives of the lesson. At the end of the chapter, you will be able to identify the barriers and the necessary resources for successfully addressing students' learning educational needs in effective and functional ways, designing differentiated activities to access general curriculum. Let's start to letter C, learning characteristics. Good visual ability is critical in learning. Most school lessons are done through blackboard writing, presentations, or handouts in most major subjects. Visual impairments, whether mild, moderate, or severe, affect the student's ability to participate in normal classroom activities. In the past, students who are visually impaired are placed in special institutions. Nowadays, most are enrolled with other children who are not visually impaired. Learners with difficulty seeing have restricted ways to learn incidentally from their surroundings, since most of them learn through visual clues. Karamihan sa pagtuturo is through blackboard writing, presentations, or handouts. Pero napakahalaga sa pagkatuto ng isang learners to have a good visual ability. But how do we deal to those learners with visual impairments? Kasi hindi may iwasan na makasalamuha tayo ng isang students with difficulty in seeing. That affects to child's educational academic performance. Dati kasi yung mga ganitong cases is may special treatment o institutions para sa kanila. But now, most are enrolled with other children who are not visually impaired. So, dahil dito, karamihan sa mga learners na may same situation ay hindi na motivate na makisali o makijoin, makapag-participate sa mga classroom activities. Let's proceed to the next slide, general educational adaptations. Modification in teaching is needed to accommodate students with difficulty seeing. The following strategies may be considered. If the use of books is part of your lesson, students with difficulty seeing should be informed ahead of time so that they can be ordered in an audio-recorded format. Dahil nga mahirap sa isang learner na with difficulties na matuto and to absorb the lesson, we as a teacher ay kinakailangan may pagbabago o mag-a-adjust tayo when it comes to our teaching strategy. So, kapag mga ganitong sitwasyon, you as a teacher dapat inform yung mga students with difficulty in seeing para makapaghanda halimbawa ng recorded lesson para sa araw na yon. Pero most of the students na may visual impairment naman is gumagamit ng salamin o optical lenses at hindi naman ganun ka-required ang audio or recorded lesson. Maliban na lamang dun sa mga talagang totally blinded o bulag talaga at di makakita na kailangan talaga ang sense of hearing. Okay, number 2, portions of textbooks and other printed materials may be recorded so that visually impaired students can listen instead of focusing on the visual presentation. So, yun nga, pwede natin gawing learning strategies para sa pagkatuto nila yung recorded teaching. Halimbawa, gagamit tayo ng mga visual presentations sa klase, yung katulad ng textbooks and other printed materials, may be recorded para marinig nila ang nais nating ituro. Okay, next. All words written on the board should be read clearly. Students with difficulty seeing should be seated near the board so that they can easily move close to the instructional materials used during the lesson. So, ayan. Nung ako ay senior high, meron ako kaklase na nakasalamin na siya, pero kailangan pa rin niyang lumapit sa unahan kapag susulat kasi ang tingin daw niya is blurred yung nakikita kasi nearsighted siya. Tayo bilang magiging guro, pwede nating tanungin kung sino yung mga may problema sa paningin na gusto sa una sila lagi nakapwesto. At kung alam naman natin na may estudyante tayong with visual impairment, dapat piniprepare nating presentations o pati pagsulat sa board is readable o nababasa. And then, students with difficulty seeing might need more time to complete a task or homework. Teachers should monitor the students closely to know who needs extra time in completing tasks. So, another thing, as a teacher, i-consider natin yung time na matapos ng learner ang task na naka-assign. Kasi mahirap talaga makasabay kung may problem ka sa visual. And yes, palagi tayo mag-a-adjust for them to learn. So, for the next slide, I added some information kasi medyo maikli yung scope ng aking report. So, it is early education for the visually impaired. Let's talk about it. While civilization as far back as the ancient Egyptians have been interested in education for the blind, it was not until the 18th and the 19th centuries that specialized schools were first created. This was thanks in part of the development of Braille, an impulse reading system which allowed blind or visually impaired students to read using their fingers. So, way back 18th to 19th centuries, nagkaroon na nga ng specialized schools for the blind. And that time, Louis Braille invented the Braille reading system, kung saan it allows visually impaired students na makabasa through their fingers. So, ito yung example ng Braille. Ito nga yung unang ginamit ng mga soldiers noon to deliver a message. Ginamit ito to represent letters, numbers, and even punctuation marks. So, karagdagan pa, here are some suggested activities to learners with difficulty in seeing. Determine what medium is suited to the needs of the learners. Example, Braille, printed, auditory strategies, objects, symbols, and etc. And provide vocabulary building activities such as word puzzles and Scrabbles in either tactile 2 or large format. So, tulad nga na sinabi ko kanina, mag-provide tayo ng mga materials na suited for our learners like Braille, printed, mga auditory strategies, and yung vocabulary activities na mag-gain ang learners ng knowledge if he or she is having difficulties in visual. Like, pwede yung word puzzle o yung Scrabble. Another tips, when you are teaching a student with visual impairment, it is important to clearly explain all visual materials. You should also get in the habit of dictating what you are writing on the chalkboard or whiteboard. This way, students who are unable to see the board can still follow along with the material. And take notes, always give oral instructions. Do not provide your student with a handout that contains assignments instructions. Students with visual impairment in your class may have difficulty seeing the words and learning what is expected. Instead, you should always give oral instructions for every assignments and activities.
Before I end the discussion, I prepared 2 questions. If you want to answer, you may use our chat box. I hope that my discussion is clear and precise. But if you have questions and clarifications, please do not hesitate to ask me. I hope you are all well, staying safe and healthy. Thank you for listening.